It had been 10 years. 10 years since I said, I do, to Dan, the man I thought would be my forever. I'm Maya, 32, a wife and a mother of 2 beautiful children. And yet, on the outside, everything looked perfect. We had the house, the family, the stable jobs. I worked in a corporate office, and Dan was a manager at a well-known construction company. On paper, we had it all. But inside, I felt hollow, like something was missing. I had always been the loving wife, the caring mother. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being a woman. I wasn't the woman Dan had fallen in love with, and he wasn't the man I had married either. It wasn't anyone's fault, not really. We'd both gotten stuck in a routine. The monotony of daily life, the weight of responsibilities, and the constant juggling of kids, work, and housework. We'd stopped trying. We stopped talking. We stopped being lovers. I'd been thinking about this for a while now, wondering if it was too late to fix things, if it was possible to bring the passion back. I had my doubts, but I also had hope. And the anniversary was my chance to remind us both of what we had once shared. I wanted to feel special again, to feel like I mattered. I wanted Dan to see me, to really see me, not just as the mother of his children, but as the woman he once couldn't keep his hands off. I had planned everything down to the last detail. The same restaurant where we had celebrated our wedding dinner. The one with the candle, lit tables, and the soft music in the background. I figured it would be the perfect way to rekindle the flame. I had bought a new dress, one that was a little sexier than usual. I even booked a babysitter for the kids. I was determined to make this night unforgettable. I just hoped Dan would feel the same way. But when the evening finally came, reality didn't meet my expectations. Dan had been working late, as usual. When he walked in, his tie was undone, his shirt wrinkled, and his eyes were tired. I had hoped for a little excitement, a little spark. But instead, he looked at me with barely a smile, too drained to care about anything other than the fact that he had just come from a 12-hour workday. We drove to the restaurant in silence. The tension between us was thick, like an unspoken wall that neither of us knew how to break. I glanced at him as we drove, waiting for some sign of affection, a little compliment, maybe even just a, "You look beautiful tonight." But nothing came. I felt my heart sink lower and lower as we pulled up to the restaurant. Dinner was awkward. It wasn't that we argued, no, it was worse. We just didn't talk. We went through the motions. I smiled at the waiter, pretended to laugh at his jokes, and ordered my food. Dan picked at his meal, barely lifting his gaze from the plate in front of him. He didn't even seem to notice that the entire evening I had tried so hard to create was falling apart in front of us. I sat there, my stomach churning, as he muttered something about the project he had been working on, his mind already somewhere else. I nodded along, trying to hold back my tears, because I realized something that night. He didn't see me anymore. He hadn't seen me for a long time. Not really. He was too absorbed in his world, and I had become a ghost in our marriage. As the night wore on, I felt more and more invisible. We finished our meal without saying much more than a few casual words. The bill came, and Dan paid it, never once looking up at me. When we got back in the car, I wanted to say something, to tell him how hurt I was, but I didn't. I just sat there, staring out the window, feeling that familiar pang of loneliness. What had happened to us? I couldn't help it. I felt betrayed by him, by everything. By the years that had slipped by unnoticed, by the way our marriage had withered. All I wanted was for him to look at me, to tell me I was still the woman he loved. But he didn't. And I knew deep down that I hadn't been the woman I used to be for him either. That night, after we got home and the kids were asleep, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about all the things I used to dream about, all the things I had wanted from life. And all I could think about now was how empty everything felt. The love, the intimacy, the excitement. It was all gone. And I didn't know how to get it back. It wasn't long after that when I saw him again. At work the next day, I ran into Garrett, a colleague I had known for years. He was 34, smart, funny, and always seemed to notice when I was having a bad day. He had that way about him. The kind that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. I couldn't remember the last time someone had made me feel that way. Garrett was always the one who listened to me vent, who smiled when I felt low, who noticed when I needed a break. That morning, I had felt like I was about to snap. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. When Garrett asked how my anniversary had gone, I couldn't hold back. I poured out everything. How Dan had been distant, how nothing felt the way it used to, how I just wanted to feel special again. Garrett listened intently, nodding, offering me empathy and understanding. He told me that relationships were hard, that marriages took work, but he also said that no one should have to feel like they were invisible. He was so kind, so thoughtful, and I found myself telling him more than I had intended. I feel like I've lost myself, Garrett. Like I don't know who I am anymore, or what I want. I used to be happy. I used to feel like I mattered. He looked at me, his expression softening. Mia, you matter. You always have. His words hit me harder than I expected. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear them until they left his mouth. I could feel the heat rise in my cheeks, a mix of gratitude and something else. Something that made my heart race, just a little faster. We talked more after work, grabbing a coffee at a nearby cafe. It was supposed to be casual, just a chat, but something in the way he looked at me made me feel more alive than I had in years. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was something. And I realized, sitting there across from Garrett, that I had missed that feeling. The feeling of being seen, of being cared for. Maybe it was dangerous. Maybe I was fooling myself. But in that moment, I didn't care. I just wanted to feel like I was worth something again. Garrett's presence made the world feel a little less heavy. And as we said goodbye that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something that I was both afraid of and, in some twisted way, excited for. Maybe it wasn't the right thing to do. Maybe it wasn't the answer I was looking for. But in the silence that followed our goodbyes, I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't invisible anymore. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about Garrett. His words had stuck with me more than I cared to admit. You matter. You always have. They echoed in my head like a soft whisper, something I hadn't realized I needed so desperately. With every passing moment, I found myself anticipating our next conversation, our next meeting. It wasn't just the comfort of someone listening, it was the way he made me feel alive again. The way he made me feel like I was more than just a wife and mother. I felt seen, and it made me crave more. Garrett was the kind of man who paid attention to the little things. He remembered my coffee order, asked about my day, and noticed when I was upset, even when I tried to hide it. Every conversation with him was easy, effortless, like we had known each other for years. He didn't have to try to make me feel good. He just did. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was failing. I felt noticed. I felt wanted. It was intoxicating. One afternoon, we found ourselves alone in the office after hours, wrapping up some loose ends before the weekend. I didn't think much of it at first. We were both just trying to get some work done. But the silence between us felt different that day. There was an electricity in the air, a tension that hadn't been there before. Every time he got close, I could feel the heat between us, an unspoken understanding that was slowly building. Are you doing anything tonight? Garrett asked casually, leaning against the desk where I was working. His voice was softer than usual, his gaze lingering on me just a moment longer than it should have. It wasn't a question about plans. It was an invitation. I froze for a second. The old me would have made an excuse, would have steered the conversation away, but the new me, the me who had felt ignored for so long, she wanted something different. She wanted to feel alive. I don't know, I said, avoiding his eyes but feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. I was thinking of just relaxing tonight, maybe catch up on some reading. Well, I'll be here for a while, he said with a smile. If you feel like getting out of here, I'd be happy to grab a drink with you. No pressure, of course. I knew what he was offering. It wasn't just a drink, it was an opportunity for something more. And I knew, deep down, that I was already starting to feel something for him. Something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't love yet, but it was a kind of attraction that was hard to ignore. The kind of attraction that made my heart beat faster and my palms sweat. I agreed to meet him, despite the small voice in my head telling me this wasn't the right thing to do. When we met later that evening, the world felt a little brighter. The air between us crackled with anticipation, and I felt giddy, like a teenager sneaking around with a crush. We went to a cozy bar, one of those dimly lit places with comfortable booths and soft music playing in the background. The drinks flowed easily, and so did our conversation. We talked about everything: work, our childhoods, even our dreams for the future. It felt so natural, so effortless, like we were the only two people in the world. At some point, our laughter slowed, and there was this stillness between us. Garrett's eyes locked on mine, and I could feel the pull. The space between us seemed to shrink, and I could no longer ignore the chemistry, that had been building all week. He reached out, his hand gently brushing mine. I could hear the thumping of my own heartbeat in my ears as I looked down at our hands, still touching. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. I could pull away. I could make an excuse. I could go home to Dan and pretend like this never happened. But then I thought of the way Dan had looked at me that night. How distant he had been. How he barely even noticed me. I thought about all the times I had tried to make an effort to feel special, but it always felt like I was invisible to him. And I thought about Garrett. Do you ever feel like? Garrett's voice broke through my thoughts, his words soft and vulnerable. Like you're just going through the motions. Like you're not really living, just existing. I didn't answer right away. I didn't know how to answer, but everything inside me screamed that this was the truth. I wasn't really living. Not anymore. I had been existing, playing the role of wife and mother, but I had forgotten what it felt like to just be me. To feel passion, to feel desired. Yeah, I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. I do. Without another word, Garrett leaned in, his lips brushing against mine, and that was it. The moment I had been secretly craving, the moment I had been running from, was here. His kiss was gentle at first, testing, but soon it deepened, more urgent, more hungry. I felt my body react before my mind could catch up. I kissed him back, allowing myself to feel something I hadn't felt in so long. Something real, something alive. I knew it was wrong. I knew it wasn't fair to Dan. But in that moment, it didn't matter. I was desperate to feel something other than the hollow ache I had been living with for years. And in Garrett's arms, I felt seen. I felt wanted. We didn't say anything after that. Words weren't needed. What happened next was just a blur of heat and longing. It felt like a dream, like I was outside of myself, outside of the life I had built. And as I lay there afterward, my head resting on Garrett's chest, I couldn't help but wonder how I had gotten to this point. How had I gone from the woman who had once promised to love only one man to this? But it didn't matter. The damage was already done. The next few days felt like a whirlwind. I couldn't stop thinking about Garrett. About the way he made me feel. About the connection we had shared. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the guilt that lingered in the back of my mind. I tried to go through the motions with Dan. I did everything I was supposed to do. Cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids. But inside, I was torn. I was living two lives, and each day it felt like I was sinking deeper into the lies. And yet, the more I saw Garrett, the more I knew that I couldn't stop. I didn't know what this was, or where it would lead, but I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were with Dan. I couldn't unfeel what I felt for Garrett. What had started as a harmless meeting, a little bit of attention, had spiraled into something I wasn't sure I could control anymore. But I wasn't ready to face the consequences. Not yet. The days following that night with Garrett were a blur of guilt and excitement. On one hand, I was walking around with this secret, a secret that was burning inside of me, making it hard to look Dan in the eye. On the other hand, I couldn't help the rush I felt every time I saw Garrett, every time we exchanged a smile, a look, a word. It wasn't just the physical attraction anymore. It was the emotional connection, something I hadn't even realized I had been starved for. And the more I saw him, the more I began to question everything in my life. But despite everything, I tried to keep up appearances. Dan never suspected a thing. He was still the same distant, tired man he had been for months. He still spent his evenings slaving away at work, coming home exhausted, barely able to carry on a conversation. I watched him, feeling this strange disconnect between us, as if we were strangers sharing a house. And it hurt. But what hurt even more was knowing that I was now hiding something from him. Something that would destroy everything if it ever came to light. It wasn't like I didn't love him anymore. It wasn't like I didn't care. But the truth was, I had been craving something more. Something I hadn't felt in years. And I had found it in Garrett. The thought of losing that connection, losing the feeling of being seen and desired, was unbearable. Every time we were together, I felt alive in a way I hadn't felt in so long. I told myself it was just a fling, just a way to get out of the rut, just a mistake that would be over soon. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. And then came the day that everything unraveled. It started as an ordinary Thursday. Dan had been staying late at work for a project deadline, and I had taken the kids to a friend's house for a playdate. I decided to stop by Garrett's apartment afterward, just to clear my mind and unwind. What started as a casual stop turned into hours of talking, laughing, and yes, kissing. I had told myself that I could stop, that I could go home, but every time I tried, Garrett pulled me back in. And honestly, I didn't want to leave. I was running late by the time I finally said goodbye. The kids were still at their playdate, so I quickly rushed home to change and get everything ready for when they returned. But as I pulled into the driveway, I saw something that made my heart drop into my stomach. Dan's car was parked out front. He was home early. I felt the panic rise in my chest. My hands trembled as I tried to steady myself. What if he knew? What if he had found out? I couldn't let him know, not now. Not like this. I tried to calm myself, telling myself that he was probably just tired and needed a break. I put on a smile and walked inside. But when I saw him sitting there, not at the kitchen table, not at the couch, but at the computer, with the screen glowing in front of him, I knew. I knew the truth was about to come out. The silence between us was deafening. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but it cracked. "What are you doing here?" Dan didn't look up right away. He was staring at the screen, his face unreadable. And then, slowly, he turned to face me. His eyes were hard cold. There was no warmth in them anymore, just a bitter edge that sent a chill through my spine. "Maya?" he said, his voice low and controlled. "I think we need to talk." I felt my heart race. My breath caught in my throat. "Talk about what?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. He stood up from his chair, walked over to the desk, and without a word, pressed play on the video he had open on the screen. The room seemed to close in around me as the footage played. Footage of me and Garrett. Not just kissing, but in an intimate moment that I never thought would see the light of day. My stomach churned as the weight of the situation crashed down on me. How had this happened? How had it come to this? Dan was silent for a long time. The only sound in the room was the muffled sound of the video playing, my own voice, my own body, exposed for the world to see. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But I couldn't. I stood there, frozen, the truth hanging in the air like a thick, suffocating fog. When the video ended, Dan finally spoke. His voice was quieter now, almost too calm. "So, this is what you've been doing, Mia. This is what you've been hiding from me." I didn't know what to say. My heart was pounding in my chest, my body frozen in place. The guilt was overwhelming. I wanted to apologize, to explain. But the words wouldn't come. I had no excuse for what I had done. There was nothing I could say that would take it all back. Dan walked closer to me, his eyes never leaving mine. He was still calm, but there was a hardness in his gaze that I had never seen before. "I trusted you. I thought I knew you, Mia. I thought I knew who you were. But now, I don't even recognize you anymore." I felt my chest tighten, the reality of what I had done sinking in. "Dan, please?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. I never meant for this to happen. I don't know how it got to this point, but I was lost. I was so lost, and I was just trying to feel like I mattered again. "You think I didn't notice?" Dan's voice cracked, slightly, a tremor of pain escaping that he couldn't quite hide. "You think I didn't see how distant you were? How you shut me out? I'm not blind, Mia. I saw it all. But I didn't think you'd go this far." His words hit me like a punch in the stomach. I had been so selfish, so focused on my own needs that I had completely disregarded him. I had never stopped to think about how he might be feeling, how he might have been struggling just as much as I had. But now, it was too late. The damage was done. "I'm sorry." I choked out, tears starting to fall. "I didn't want this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." Dan's face softened for just a moment, but it was quickly replaced by something colder. "But you did, Mia. You did hurt me, and now, I don't know if I can forgive you." I looked at him, my heart breaking all over again. "Dan, please. I love you. I do. I never stopped loving you, but I lost myself. And I found myself in Garrett. But that was a mistake. A huge mistake. I can't take it back, but I'm so sorry. Please don't leave me." But even as the words left my mouth, I knew that it was too late. This wasn't something that could be fixed. Not by apologies, not by promises, not by love. Dan took a step back, his eyes still locked on mine. "I don't know what to do anymore, Mia," he said quietly. "I don't know if I can stay." And with those words, everything changed. I had crossed a line I could never uncross, and now the life I had built with Dan, the life I had fought so hard to hold on to, was slipping away. I could feel it unraveling, thread by thread, and all I could do was stand there and watch as it all crumbled. I had always believed that love could fix anything, that if you cared enough, everything could be repaired. But standing in front of Dan, watching him stare at me with a mixture of hurt and disbelief, I realized how naive I had been. There was no going back. The truth, the betrayal. It had shattered everything, and there was no way to glue it back together. Dan didn't speak for a long time. The silence in the room felt suffocating, as if the walls were closing in around me. I wanted to reach out, to touch him, to make him understand, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. I could see it in his eyes. The trust was gone. It was something I had broken, something I couldn't ever rebuild. "I don't know who you are anymore, Mia," Dan finally said, his voice steady but cold. "I don't know what to believe. How could you do this to us?" I opened my mouth, but the words felt too heavy, too wrong. How could I explain the mess I had made? How could I explain that, in my desperate need to feel seen, to feel desired, I had destroyed everything? "I'm so sorry," I whispered, my throat tight with emotion. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But please, understand that this wasn't about not loving you. It was me." I felt invisible, Dan. I felt like I had disappeared into being just your wife, just a mother. I thought if I could feel something, anything, it would make it better. But I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Dan's face softened for just a moment, but then he blinked, almost as if he was trying to fight the emotions threatening to surface. "I don't know if I can even look at you the same way again. You took something from me, Mia. Something I can't get back." The weight of his words hit me like a ton of bricks. Something I can't get back. He wasn't just talking about trust. He was talking about the way he had once loved me, the way I had once mattered to him. I had taken that, and now I was left with nothing but the wreckage of what we had. I wanted to tell him I was sorry, to apologize over and over again, to beg him to give me another chance. But deep down, I knew that the damage I had done was too much. I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Once the truth was out, once the secrets were exposed, there was no going back. We couldn't pretend anymore. Dan turned away from me, walking over to the window, his back to me as he stared out at the night. I could see the muscles in his shoulders tense, the way his fists clenched. I knew he was fighting it. Fighting the rage, the pain. He was holding himself together, but I could feel him slipping away from me with every second that passed. "How long, Mia?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, though the question hit me like a slap. "How long have you been seeing him?" The question felt like a knife to the chest. "A few weeks," I said quietly, looking down at my hands. "It was stupid. It just happened. I didn't plan it. It was just an escape, Dan, an escape from feeling empty. I never meant to hurt you. I swear I didn't." His back stiffened, and I saw him swallow hard, trying to keep his composure. "A few weeks." His voice cracked. "You've been lying to me for a few weeks. And for what? To feel wanted. To feel alive. You think that's enough to justify this?" I could hear the pain in his voice now, raw and unfiltered. I thought I could feel alive. I wanted to say, but I knew better. There were no excuses. There was no justifying what I had done. "I never meant for it to go this far," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I thought if I could feel something, anything, it would make the emptiness go away. But now, I see that it was a mistake. A huge mistake." Dan turned around, his face flushed with anger. "Do you even realize what you've done? It's not just the cheating, Mia. It's the lying. The betrayal. It's the fact that you made me feel like I wasn't enough, like I was just someone to take for granted. I trusted you. I trusted you with everything." Tears streamed down my face, but I couldn't stop them. The weight of my actions, the consequences of what I had done, were finally sinking in. I had broken everything. I had ruined us. "I'm so sorry," I whispered again, my voice shaking. "I never wanted to make you feel like that. I never wanted to hurt you. You've been working so hard, and I just wanted to feel like I mattered again. But I didn't know how to ask for that. I didn't know how to make you see me." Adane shook his head, tears threatening to form in his own eyes, but he blinked them away. "You should have talked to me, Mia. You should have come to me with your feelings. But instead, you chose to do this. You chose someone else. And now, I don't even know who you are anymore." The words hit me like a fist to the gut. The person I had been, the woman I thought I was gone. In trying to regain something I had lost, I had torn apart everything that had once been good in my life. Dan took a few steps back, his hands trembling as he stuffed them into his pockets. "I don't think I can do this anymore, Mia. I don't think I can live like this. Not knowing that you've lied to me, not knowing that you chose someone else over me." The reality of it settled like a stone in my chest. I had pushed him too far. I had broken the bond we had once shared. There was no going back, no second chances, Not this time. I took a shaky step toward him, reaching out, but he held up a hand, stopping me in my tracks. I think you need to go. I need space to think. I need to figure out what I want, if there's anything left to even fix. I nodded, feeling the last of my hopes slip away, as though it were being drained from me with each word he spoke. The love I had taken for granted, the family I had built. All of it was slipping through my fingers. I didn't say anything else. There was nothing left to say. I turned, walking slowly toward the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. As I opened the door, I heard Dan call after me, his voice so soft, so broken, that it nearly shattered me in that moment. Please don't come back unless you're sure you can fix what you've broken, Mia. Because I'm not sure I can even look at you the same way again. I closed the door behind me, the finality of it ringing in my ears. I was alone, and I had lost everything. The consequences of my actions were clear now. There was no escaping the truth, no escaping the broken pieces of my life that I had shattered. I had lost Dan. I had lost the life we had built together. And now, I was left with the wreckage of everything I thought I could rebuild. There was no turning back. I couldn't undo the betrayal, and I couldn't unfeel the consequences.